2 weeks ago, I recorded this video. It's about comic books. I have moved after living in the same place for 40 years. I've moved and I can't find most of my things, but at least things that were important to me. So I made a little video about these comics. Strange Tales, Daredevil 3, Spider-Man 16, and Fantastic Four. That's that, 48. It was the first Silver Surfer Galactus. So I have been looking for other comics, and I have not found them, but I found 4 books about comics. This was 1970. Lupoff and Thompson. Jim Steranko's Volume 1. I have Volume 2. I can't find it. Steranko History of Comics. Julius Schwartz, Man of Two Worlds. And William Schoell's Silver Age Comics. I know comics, the Silver Age, up through the Silver Age. I know something about comics. I don't really know a lot about comics after the Silver Age. So I will go over each of these. They're all fascinating. Okay, this one and this one were both published in 1970. I read them in 1970. I have read each of them at least twice more since then. This was published 2000. And probably I've also read it 3 times. And this I've probably read 3 times. I also have the Kindle book. I don't think the others have Kindle books. They're all pretty fascinating. I guess I'll start here with the last one. I'm going to kind of go over each one briefly, and then we'll go back and go over them in more depth. Silver Age Comics, copyright 2010. DC Comics, Man of Steel, Superman Family, Gotham Crusader, Amazing Amazon, The Flash, Green Lantern, Marvel Comics, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, Pym, Captain America, Daredevil, other companies, Charlton, excellent, Mighty, Gold Key, Tower, and others. You know, I used to have all these because my aunt had a bookstore, and she was a big believer in comic books to bring in kids, and the adults would buy the books. And I witnessed that. She wanted me to take over. I didn't want to. Julius Schwartz, Man of Two Worlds. Man of Two Worlds, copyright 2000. I have hand tremors. I'm an old man. Oh, yeah. Lots of troubles. So he started off, he was in science fiction and got involved with comics. True story of the origin of kryptonite. Maybe you don't know that. In brief, it was radio. Television didn't exist yet, not the way we know it today or even remotely similar, but radio did. And there was Superman on the radio. And the guy who played Superman was going on vacation, except nobody was told. He thought everybody knew. He had told the proper authorities, and they had not told the people who actually produced the radio show. He wasn't going to be there for 2 weeks, so they had somebody else play Superman, and they disguised his voice, made it very harsh, and it was because of this substance, kryptonite. And then, what do you know? 2 weeks later, they got rid of the kryptonite, and the regular actor took back over. When Stan Lee was, editor for the big comics, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Julius Schwartz was editor of the big comics, Superman, Batman, so forth. New look Batman. All right, now, you may not recognize all these images. Human Torch, the original Human Torch, Batman, these planes, Black Hawk, Hawkman, Captain Marvel, Billy Batson, Captain Marvel, Webhead, Captain America, original Green Lantern, Spider-Man. May not know. That is Green Hornet, and that is Kato. The Steranko History of Comics. It's volume 1 of 2. I can't find volume 2. Copyright 1970 by James Steranko. So there's an intro by Federico Fellini. I don't know who he is, but he was pretty famous. This image, Alex Raymond. Talk about him a little. I will go into it in more depth. So this has, okay, here's Dick Tracy, Phantom, Buck Rogers, Red Rider. You may know him more from the movie. Alex Raymond. Immensely important in comic books, as with Hal Foster. Flash Gordon. Milton Kenneth, Steve Canyon. I read Steve Canyon when I was a boy. Anyway, we'll go through all of these, but like I said at the beginning, I'm just kind of touching on each one. this. All in color for a dime. The comic book must have been the greatest bargain in the world. For 10 cents, you got 64 pages of colorful adventure and an array of tales more outlandish, exciting than those in 1001 Nights. And you met a bunch of swell fellas. Oh yeah, down here. You are an unseen visitor to the grimy, dingy offices of the comic book publishing companies of the past. You're witness to the dizzying ups and downs of the curious empires which spawned the heroes you revered as a child. The tangled lawsuits lodged in their behalf. Louis Nizer was once Superman's lawyer. The great fortunes made and lost on the dimes of American schoolboys. You know, I think I've got something here. Yeah. Louis Nizer, My Life in Court. Now, you may not have heard of this guy at all. He was once as famous as anyone in America, and not that long ago. 1961 memoir, My Life in Court. I became a lawyer, practiced law for 30 years. I don't know for a fact that Louis Nizer had influence on me, but he probably did, because everybody of my generation had heard of Louis Nizer. When the Warren Report came out in '64, who did they ask to write the introduction? Louis Nizer. He was a trusted lawyer. See if we can find that. Yeah, he wrote the foreword to the Doubleday and Company publication of the Warren Report. So Steranko History of Comics, begins with the comic strips, Dick Tracy, Phantom, and moves on. Here's the end of his first chapter, and he's talking about what comics needed. That comics didn't exist yet as we think of them. Comics needed was a startling new approach, a bold and sensational direction to thrust them into the realm of popular success. The source was the pulps. That's page 13. We'll get up to page 33. The rest of the next 20 pages are talking about the pulps, pulp fiction. And then only then does he get the comics in an 83-page book. The bloody pulps. Well, that's because the one that was the breakout was The Shadow. The Shadow knows. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts and minds of men? Margot does. Oh yeah, Doc Savage is my favorite. I think I have all 181 original. Now, this is the advertisement for Doc Savage. Superman, Doc Savage, man of mastermind and body. Doc Savage magazine, all newsstand. This was, I think, 1933 advertisement. And, of course, Superman's not invented yet. Won't be any Superman comics for a while. Now, what I had in this, this you may not be interested in. I wrote a novel. Actually, I didn't finish writing the novel. I wrote an outline and sample chapters back in the mid to late 90s called Countdown to Kansas. I submitted query letters to 3 publishers, and all 3 said, when you finish it, send it to us. This was my outline. Now, I was the first lawyer in the Wichita region Yellow Pages listed as practicing computer law. I would show you that page if I could find it, but that's another thing I haven't been able to find. Now, even then, in 94, I knew about Y2K. I invented this organization for the future, VEST, Computer Virus Emergency Search Team. It was based on NEST. If you saw my other earlier, you know I was a nuclear weapons safety man at one time. And there's a program called NEST, Nuclear Emergency Search Team. Well, I invented VEST, and it doesn't exist as far as I know. Chapter 3 was Countdown to Kansas. This is where they find out that some good old boys who are smarter than they look have built a nuclear weapon in Kansas. They're looking for it because before the nuclear weapon goes off, the computer virus is going off. Fire alarm. The VEST, Virus Emergency Search Team, calls the computer virus a fire. So there's fire alarm. And if it starts to grow, they call it a farm crisis. Grows into a spider web. Now, I was going to write to, I haven't actually done this, and see if I can get the rights to quote a few lines from a few songs. One of them is The Doors' Light My Fire. It started, the virus is spreading. And then when it triggers the nuclear weapon goes live, it can be detected. Disco Inferno. Now, this has more than just the a lot of this information is probably going to be lost over time. DISCO was the genuine acronym for the Defense Industrial Security Clearance Organization, DISCO. In Kansas, the Director Unit Command Kansas, DUCK. So he was the Disco Duck. You should look up Disco Duck on YouTube and watch the video. Anyway, yeah, I talk about that in the author's notes. Now, I didn't finish because I had, unbelievably, a total computer failure. I sent it to a data recovery. They couldn't get it. The arm broke off. In these old computers, there's medium, an arm. The arm broke off, chipped it was just lost. I never had the gumption to go into it again. Anyway, Doc Savage, Superman, Spider. This was the origin of Stan Lee's interest that eventually became Spider-Man. So, Pulp Fiction series. G8 and his battle H's. And old geezers remember these. So we make it to Hugo Gernsback's Amazing Stories thrilling wonder. The pulp heroes had maintained a vast secret society for preserving law and order. Now their day was over, but the country still needed a good 10-cent hero. The comic industry was officially about to be born. And it was born Superman. I actually held one of these in my hands at one time. The first Superman and first Action Comics. I never owned one. I owned Amazing Fantasy 15, but not the first Superman. Really made an enormous difference. And then this guy, Batman. I talked about Batman some. The Joker. Gonna have a superhero, need a villain. Chalk-faced Harlequin. Then Captain America. Human Torch and Submariner. All Winners Comics. Blonde Phantom. Had to have a girl. And had to have supporting characters. Robin the Boy Wonder. All-Star Comics. Boy Commandos. Boy Explorers. The Kid Gang era belongs to the comics just as much as the superhero. Somewhat like a child and father, one thing is certain. As long as there are kids, there will be kid gangs. Especially if Jack Kirby, has anything to say about it. He loved writing these, apparently. That's what the Steranko says and other sources. Probably be YA books today, young adult. I just may throw my hat in the ring and write a YA series. I've already outlined it. It's just a question of if I actually do it. Some of the books I've outlined and written, I never completed. So, stop here on Steranko. Julius Schwartz, Man of Two Worlds. Page 96, 97. I've heard people say Stan Lee's a liar, but Julius Schwartz told exactly the same story in print in 2000. Jack Schiff, who was then the Batman editor, and Mort Weisinger, who was then the Superman editor, felt their two heroes might run the danger of becoming overexposed, and together they asked me not to include them on the cover of Justice League of America. They would occasionally make a cameo or perhaps a single issue guest appearance, but they wouldn't appear on the cover. When circulation began to slip a little, Julius Schwartz, went to the publisher to try to come up with some ideas how to boost sales. Gee, I'd like to use Superman and Batman on the cover, I said. Well, haven't you used them all along? He demanded. Because Mort and Jack didn't want me to, I replied. You go and tell those sons of bitches that Superman and Batman belong to DC Comics and not to Mort Weisinger and Jack Sheft, he bellowed loudly. Thus, Superman and Batman began to show up on the covers and take part in the adventures, and sales increased dramatically. Now, my boss, who was head of DC Comics, whose name was Jack Leibowitz, used to play golf with Martin Goodman, who was the head of Marvel Comics. And one day, Jack bragged that in addition to beating him at golf, he was also beating him in comics because one of his titles was outselling everything else. Goodman was incredulous and scared and asked what the comic was. The Justice League of America, Jack replied. Never heard of it, Goodman retorted. What's it about and what's so good about it? Well, instead of it being based around a single superhero, we have a whole team of superheroes working together against a given menace or villain in a book-length adventure, and the kids love it. And I did. At one time, I had read all of the Justice League from the very first in Brave and Bold. Quite a novel idea, and pretty much every issue is a sellout. So once the golf game was over, Goodman hightailed it back to his young editor, whose name was Stan Lee, and told him that he wanted him to put out a magazine featured a group of superheroes working together as a team. And thus was born Marvel's The Fantastic Four. Of course, the Fantastic Four sold very well and helped to turn around Marvel's sagging sales. So do I dare say, indirectly, my success with the Justice League of America can be credited not just saving DC, but saving Marvel as well. Nothing like patting oneself on the back, particularly when it is well deserved. Man of Two Worlds. That's Julius Schwartz' story. Accepting the honorary Nebula Award for Siegel and Schuster in 1979 from Jack Williamson, president of the Science Fiction Writers of America. For there was Superman or Batman before Ray Bradbury or Harlan Ellison ever picked up a pen. Before there was science fiction fans and conventions, there was Julius Schwartz, a man who would have an incredible effect on all of them and more. One of the blah, blah, blah. So down to, besides working on the Superman and Batman characters, he created much of the mythology we now take for granted. Schwartz was also responsible for revitalizing nearly every important DC Comics character, highlighted by the mighty Justice League of America. He has since been known as the comics beloved in what has since been Silver Age. Over 40 years, Schwartz captained such blazing talents of the comics industry as Bob Kane, Bill Finger, Kurt Swan, Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Alan Moore, and many others. Here in Julie's old words is a behind-the-scene look at a life spent having fun and making sure readers did too. A little more about Julius Schwartz, a man of two worlds. Talking about the first Silver Age comic. And I started Showcase. Fireman Farrell was my favorite. And that says something about my judgment compared with others. I was really disappointed that they didn't have a Fireman Farrell series. And as he says, Schwartz says, the first three showcases flopped. I suggested we try to revive the Flash, who had died with the demise of the other superhero titles, with the exception of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Why I thought the Flash would succeed. So he wanted to try it. They agreed. Editorial director Irwin Donenfeld replied, "Now who will edit it?" All eyes turned toward me. Thus, the former editor of the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, was designated by default as the new editor of the Silver Age Flash. So, the Silver Age Flash was Barry Allen. This is Silver Age Comics, Chapter 5, The Flash, also known as the Scarlet Speedster, first appeared Showcase 4, October 1956, which is generally considered the very first comic book of the Silver Age. Police scientist Barry Allen. And that is how he was described in the comic, a police scientist. So, Flash 123, Flash of Two Worlds. This also was Julius Schwartz's idea. Written by Gardner Fox, but Julius Schwartz's idea. Many Worlds. Here is Stan Lee's original typewritten synopsis for Fantastic Four #1. It's literally a typewriter. Synopsis, the Fantastic Four, July 61 schedule. Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, Invisible Girl, Susan Storm, Ben Grimm. I think it's supposed to be Ben Gordon, Johnny Storm. Here. There are crackpots who say Stanley didn't invent the Fantastic Four. That's kind of an index, how to tell. They're either dishonest or unable to do research. Julius Schwartz and Stan Lee tell the same stories. Stan, when asked, produced his original synopsis, typewritten. Good evidence. So, to review, in the late 1800s, series and serial books became popular. Edward Stretmeyer wrote The Rover Boys and Ruth Fielding, Hardy Boys, and Nancy Drew. Comic strips were popular, such as Buck Rogers. Then Pulp Fiction in Dime magazines, The Shadow, Doc Savage. comic books would come along. Golden Age, 1940. Superman, Human Torch, Submariner, Batman, Captain America, the Justice Society of America, the Jay Garrick Flash. Editor was Julius Schwartz. Flash was in 40 to 49, his own comic. He ended in 51 as a member of the Justice Society. And Julius Schwartz suggested they try to reinvent Flash. October 1956. Barry Allen, police scientist. It's years later, 1961. Stan Lee begins a silver age for Marvel on orders from publisher. Invents the Fantastic Four. Types this up. That's pretty much the story. Slightly different than was published, but pretty much.